one needs the seas to be wetter. We don't need all our cheese to be cheddar. Our only needs to get better and better and better and better.
Hey everyone, I'm Jessica Jake. I'm here with Betty Guadagno today and very excited to talk to you. I've actually seen you before. Yeah, so welcome. I saw you speaking at IANS and I didn't get to say hi, but my daughter Jade did get to say hi to you, and so I was just always had in the back of my mind. It's like, I'd love to have her on the podcast, love to have her on.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. Your daughter is wonderful and amazing. So you did a great job. And I'm so glad that we became friends after that conference. And yeah, it was such a beautiful experience to be at the IANS conference. And it was a blessing to be asked to share. And I'm grateful for all the connections that I made there.
Yeah. So I loved how you shared no holds barred, like your true experience, your true life, everything. And I know people love to hear the experience. And I had a very shallow near-death experience myself. I've had other spiritually transformative experiences, but it's always so cool. Like your experience was so profound, right? It was so profound, and you had more than one experience. And so I'd love to just let you just share all of that. And then what also caught my eye too was, I know at the end when someone was asking you questions about what helped you, you mentioned IFS, internal family systems, which I've actually had a few people on here and there and like studied that. And I love that. And I do look at that in from the spiritual perspective. And you just have questions around that, like knowing that model and what you experienced, and that this is a temporary biological spacesuit, if you will. And so I think that's where, and then of course letting you share. I just got an email from IANS. This is going to be a new podcast, and you're the host. So that's kind of where my mind is at. I think your message is beautiful. Your story is beautiful. I have my own burning questions. And and then also if there's anything that you really want to share, because I know you do a lot of really great work. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me start from the beginning. I was born. No, I won't start from there. But yeah, I thank you so much for saying that. Sometimes it's hard for me to see my growth and my change until somebody reflects it back to me and I go, damn, that's a cool chick. Yeah, I have done a lot,
Yeah.
And yeah, so just like a brief overview, I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening in March of 2019, where I was transported to the space of eternity, the same space that people who have near-death experiences describe. I was taken there in my spiritual awakening, and my whole life transformed. I went from a drug addict, I was a prostitute, I was homeless, I was completely impoverished. And then after my spiritual experience, it was like every cell in my body absolutely demanded to transform 180 degrees. And I'm now in long-term recovery. I have a job in the recovery field. I work as a recovery coach. I'm of service. I am involved in so many communities, and it feels so amazing to be connected to other people. My life before my spiritual experience was depravity, isolation, degradation, dereliction. And today I am so immersed around people who are interested in healing, that are vulnerable and authentic. And my whole universe is so filled with light and love. And that's not to say that things don't come up. They do. I'm still a human, but my life now compared to what it was before, there just is no comparing. It is, apples and oranges, as the saying goes.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. I don't know if you want me to share the experience.
No, I think so. I think the experience is also so cool. And just your story of your life was so touching. And the words you chose, I think you said it was like these wet blankets covering up your light. And I personally think, or have experienced and love it when I hear it echoed over and over. It's like we are these perfect spirits, and our own coping mechanisms, our own genetic makeup, our own family experience, et cetera, are all, if it's unaligned with love, it is that blocker, right? But right. Yeah. So I'd love to hear, your story and Yeah, please do. Please share.
Let me tell you about all my wet blankets. Here we go. So, yeah, I grew up in this really chaotic, dysfunctional home. My whole family is a perpetual cycle of addiction and poverty, molestation, incest, lots of sexual trauma. And, it's just been that way for generations and generations. And so for me, I was taught at a really early age what drugs were and that they made you feel out of yourself and that you didn't have to feel the way that you were feeling because there was this outside thing that could make you feel different. And it wasn't just drugs, it was also food and codependency and other people and validation and all of these, external things to make me not feel the trauma that was, like inflicted on me as a small child. And just the trauma of what my life was like, like I grew up with drug addict parents. They taught me how to use, their parents taught them how to use. And it's just been that way for generations and generations, And it is exhausting being the one to break all the generational curses. But I guess that's what I signed up for. And, in 2007, my parents had hit like a new low in their addiction. I watched them hit so many bottoms in their life, but this one was more pronounced and, like they were about to be evicted again. I mean, my whole life was like a constant state of eviction. Like we moved once a year. It was just like very unstable and, no money for rent. The lights are turned off. The gas is turned off. The phone is turned off. And, this was like all due to their addiction. And, they made this decision to stop using drugs and to stop their suffering. And they did that by committing suicide with one another. And, it's such a pronounced trauma, like I was 23 when that happened and my sister was 18 and we found them. And, it was just like, I'm enveloped in so much trauma from that experience. I really don't remember much of my life before it. And because it was like this death and awakening of a different version of myself as well. Like I had felt victimized my whole life by my circumstance. And then this happened. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a victim anymore. Now I'm going to be a perpetrator. Now I'm going to be the abuser. I will no longer take abuse and victimization from other people. I'm going to be the one to do that now. And so, like my shadow really came out and it became like my full being. It became my whole personality. And this death really forged me to drugs in this super depraved way. Like they became my whole identity. I was a devout atheist, especially after this death, because I did not want to believe what some scriptures say about suicide. Like I didn't want to think that my parents suffered their whole human life. And now you're telling me that like whatever comes next, they're also suffering. No way. That's like, there's no righteousness in that. Like I refused to believe it. And so I just believed in nothing instead, or the opposite, like I just didn't believe in God. And I had long philosophical rants about how there was nothing more. This was it. We become dirt, the end, lights out, just like this. And I was very passionate about that view, very loud, very vocal. And then it all transformed in my awakening. And I was like, oh, I have to change my whole point of view. This is so embarrassing. But so, yeah, like drugs became my whole identity. I thought that I was a party girl. I was a bartender. And I realized that the party never really started. Like I had this persona that I was like so much fun and wow, look at me. But really, I was just masking this very deep wound of abandonment and rejection and pain and grief and loss and lack. And, I just continued to sedate myself. And as situations came up and I, like more trauma, more loss. And, I just kept blaming outside circumstance. Like it couldn't be me. It definitely couldn't be the drugs that are causing all of this dysfunction in my life. It's got to be other people, right? I just have bad luck. I just keep coming across all these people that keep leaving my life and it can't be me. And like I found myself in just like this new low in my addiction. And I had a boyfriend that passed away and I had like a lot of guilt and shame around his death. And, I couldn't cope with it. And so I made this deal with myself that I would do this insane amount of drugs. And if I didn't die, I would go get help. And I woke up and I checked myself into a detox. I kept up with my deal. And, I heard the message of 12-step fellowship inside the detox, and I gave it a go. I tried, but I just couldn't understand why strangers would want to help me. Like that's what 12-step fellowship is all about. It's about, like one addict in recovery helping another. And I just, I didn't compute to me, like everything in my life had been so transactional. Like, I'll love you if you do this for me, or I'll give you this if you give me that. And in 12-step fellowship, it really is a vibration of unconditional love. And it's just about being of service to other people. And it didn't make any sense to me. And so I sort of recoiled at the whole idea of it. And I went back out using. I became like a dumpster for drugs, any and everything I could get my hands on, just to come out of myself and not feel. I mean, like, the extent of my vocabulary in active addiction was just this long laundry list of drugs that I would use, and then like how much money it would cost to spend time with me. And that was it. That was my whole life. I never used my brain for anything else. So the fact that I have like an extensive vocabulary today, and like I can speak in eloquent sentences and string a story together, is just beyond anything that I understand. Like this is all thanks to integration of my spiritual experience and spiritual awakening, that I have a voice in my life, that I have some footing and foundation in my experience. And so yeah, I had an experience where I overdosed. I had an overdose of hallucinogenics. And this is when my Kundalini awakening started to take place. And this was on March 23rd, 2019. March 23rd is the beginning of the season of Aries, which is the symbol of rebirth. And that's exactly what happened to me. It was a complete and utter transformation, rebirth from the ashes. And I'll take you on what that journey sort of looked like. So I was at the laundromat and I was like doing my laundry, and I realized that something was taking place. Like I said, I had given myself an overdose of drugs, and I was like, oh my God, how do I know what laundry is? Like, why does laundry exist? And like, I was having all these sort of like psychedelic conscious thoughts, and I realized that like the fabric of creation was starting to crack right in front of me. And so, like the quarters felt like they were the size of my face, and I was watching them shrink into this little hole. And I was like, I got to get out of here, So I start running home, and I lived about 6 blocks from the laundromat, and I'd get to a corner and it would say Madison and Stuyvesant on the street signs. And I would go to the next corner and it said Madison and Stuyvesant again. And I got to the next corner and it said it again. And I was stuck inside this loop and I was terrified. And then all of a sudden, the whole world became washed in the brightest white light ever. And then I watched all of the buildings around me crumble to the ground. And all I could see was the green lines of matrix code that made them up. And so I like really hustled home. I was like, okay, reality is crumbling, time to book it. And so I ran to my house and I walked in through the front door. I got a glimpse of myself in the mirror and I just had no idea who I was, And I started to hear like very pronounced voices in my awareness. And I heard this masculine voice, which was a person that I had met a few months before in like a drug-fueled bender. So like basically this strange man that I sort of know was like guiding me through this experience. And then it sort of transformed into every masculine energy that I've ever encountered in my life. So my father, my grandfather, uncle, like just my boyfriend was there. And it just sort of all morphed into this one energy. And I was reminded of the suicide. I was like, it felt like I was in a dream and that I was waking up from the dream. And the only thing that I could grab was the fact that my parents had committed suicide. So at this point in time, it was 35 years of human life. And the only thing that I could grab was like a 3-second memory of something. And then it started to fade away. And so yeah, a Kundalini awakening is described as like life force energy. That's what Kundalini energy is. And so I had this rush of energy going up and down all of my chakra systems, my energetic body. and it was awakening all of them. And these are things that had never had any sort of movement before, you know? So as my Kundalini was arising from my root up to my crown, when my crown opened, it was like my soul shot out of my head. And I was in eternity, completely immersed in white light, non-physical, couldn't see anything, but a lot of things were going on in my mind's eye. And so, yeah, so I was chilling in heaven. And, you know, like I said, I was an atheist when I entered this experience, and I was like, no effing way. No way do I believe that this is actually happening. And so I just thought, like, okay, it's the drugs, you know, like I'm so messed up that like I think that I'm in heaven talking to God, like how ridiculous, you know, but I just went with it. And I, you know, I was shown some things in my spiritual experience. One, I was taken through the vibration of every emotion. And, you know, like the emotions that I was very familiar with were like lack, loss, despair. And so like I was taken through those emotions, and I was shown why they exist, what they're doing here. And then I was taken home into unconditional love, because that is the ultimate truth, is unconditional love. And so basically it kind of felt like I was going up the scale of consciousness, you know, like it, but just in one instant, it was like fear, loss, lack, and then boom, unconditional love. And I just shot right up. And I was shown my place as the divine feminine energy in every pantheon, every mythological family. I was shown my place as the divine feminine energy. So I saw myself in the garden as Eve with Adam and Eve. I saw myself, you know, Jesus and Magdalene, Shiva and Shakti, Isis and Osiris, like every mythological family. It's all the same story. This is like what I was being downloaded with, but with different characters for different cultures. And so, you know, like I'm in this experience and I'm like, oh my God, I'm Eve. I destroyed creation. Oh, I had like all this pressure on myself. I thought that it was just me. And I saw that in the garden, we were nothing but spirit. And then we had this thought that we could have a thought. And then that's when we fell into human form. And so it was like this spiritual suicide. And so they correlated two events for me. They showed me my human parents' physical suicide, and they correlated it with my eternal parents, Adam and Eve's spiritual suicide. And they were like, this is why you had this experience in your life with your human parents, so that you could understand about your eternal parents. And I was like, whoa, wasn't there like a book you guys could give me? Like, that's a pretty intense experience. Like, did I have to learn it firsthand? You know, how does everybody else learn it? And so, you know, like I was very dismissive of everything that was going on in this experience. But again, I was just going with it. So, you know, I saw myself as the divine feminine, and I saw that I was awakening as that feminine energy. Like in my life before my experience, I was most certainly living in my masculine shadow, my masculine and my feminine shadow, but my masculine shadow was much more pronounced. I was ruthless. I was arrogant. I was aggressive. I was violent. I was an abuser, a manipulator. And these are all masculine shadow attributes. And so I saw myself rising into my light. And yeah, so I was taken through my pre-birth planning in my experience, which is something that has given me so much freedom in my human life. So I was shown that I, as a soul, had chosen my life before I ever came into form. Everything that had happened to me in my life, I picked it. And, you know, of course, I was like, no way. I would never pick this or that. And then they took me through the moments. They showed me like a little movie of when I, as a soul, chose everything. I was this little orb of light. I was going through what looked like a grocery store. I was picking all of these cereal boxes off the shelves, picking all of the attributes of myself, my charisma level, my intellect, my adversity, my triumph, my mission, my purpose, all these things. You know, but I hadn't gotten to any of like the good stuff yet. I had only gone through the adversity and hardship in my life. And then they told me that I was a spiritual soldier, and that the reason why I had picked the kind of life that I had picked is because I had a lot of energy to transmute. Because right now we're in the middle of the Great Awakening, and we're transforming from a level of third dimensional thinking to fifth dimensional thinking. And it's the most exciting time to be a spirit on earth. And I'm part of that army that's sent here to liberate the consciousness of the planet. And isn't that so great? And I was like, no, that sounds terrible. Like, why would anybody do that? And so then they took me through like a little movie of when I picked the moment to sign up for this mission. And I perceived that I was on like a spaceship, kind of looked like the Gravitron ride at carnivals. If you can remember that, it's like a ride, looks like a spaceship. It spins really, really fast and you could throw yourself up against the wall and there's no gravity in there. And it felt like I came out of the side of one of the walls of that ride. And I was standing in the center of this ship and I perceived what felt like hundreds of thousands of other souls and sort of like this commander, like telling us like, all right, like, this is great. Here's your mission, like imprinting it on us, like downloading us with it. And, like just the whole thing that goes along with coming into form, like you're going to forget, but you'll be able to remember whenever you want to. And so I'm watching this whole sort of thing take place and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. Okay. So I'm home. So I'm done and I'm just going to stay here. And they were like, well, no, you have to finish, the first half of your life was just boot camp. Now you actually go back and you complete your mission. And I was like, yeah, no, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to put on some pajamas. Maybe I'll get some popcorn. I'll watch from up here. Like, I don't need to go back down there. And they said, like, really, you have to go back. Like, this is what you signed up for and you have to finish. And I just said like, listen, I can't do it. And I saw myself sort of transform into this small child. And I was like banging my hands and my feet on the ground. And I was like, no, please don't, like, this is the worst thing that you can do to me. Like, send me home to like this place of reunion and comfort and safety and security. And then tell me that I have to go back into duality and go back to earth and go back into her. No, please don't do this to me. And they said, like, okay, you don't have to, like I said, like, I definitely cannot go back into her. I could see myself outside myself. I said, she needs way too much healing. She is glitched. There is no way. And they said, okay, you don't have to go back into her, but you do have to go back because you signed up for this and we need you there. So we'll show you the baby that you'll be born into. And again, like, this is about transmuting a lot of dark to light. And so they showed me everything that would happen in this baby's life. And, like I said to you, I had a double parental suicide, sexual trauma, drug addiction, poverty. I mean, like, just hardship after hardship, challenge after challenge. And then they showed me this baby and they showed me everything about her. And guess what? Her life was even more challenging than the life that I had already lived. And I thought, whoa, no way can I start from zero. I can't. I'll go back into her, I guess. All right. This is my only choice. And they said, it is your only choice. And trust us, it won't be as hard as the first half of your life. And I said, well, I don't trust you. And then I just sort of came back into my awareness, And like I said, I just wrote it off as drug-induced psychosis. And after my experience, like, I had these newly awakened eyes, even though I was still completely strung out on drugs and I didn't really know what was going on with me. And, like, I saw nature for the first time. I had this backyard and like I had lived in my apartment for like 5 years. I'd never stepped foot back there. It was like disgusting and unkempt and totally weeded and overgrown. But I had never seen nature with the eyes that I was now given. And I just wept. I fell to my knees. I couldn't believe what it looked like, the energy that was running through it, how vibrant the colors were in my disgusting, dirty backyard. It was like amazing. And, I came back with like a lot of spiritual gifts, like I could see auras. I could like read inside people's minds. I felt like I could see their truth. And all the things that were covering them from their truth. But, like, I was just like a drug addict. Like, I was just like a junkie, really. And, like, who would ever take somebody like that seriously? And, like, I just wanted to keep living the way that I was. And I found that the universe was not going to allow that to happen. That, like, this wasn't some drug-induced psychosis. This was a real experience that had happened, and I had to get onto a different path. And so all of these divine synchronicities started to happen. Like, all my drug dealers, they all decided to change their lives and stop selling drugs. Like people that did not know each other. Like I'd call up a dealer and I'd be like, hey man, what's up? And he'd be like, listen, I found Jesus. I want to be a good father. I'm going to start taking care of my family. I'm not in the game anymore. And I'm like, whoa, that's weird. Okay, bye. Click, call up the next dealer. The same story. But like these people don't know each other, like it was just totally divine. And, I found myself in heroin withdrawal, and I experienced an instantaneous healing from that. And, like that's when my mission became real clear. Like the reason why I felt like I couldn't let go of drugs is because I had a physical dependency to one of them. And then I had experienced a healing where one second I was throwing up all over myself, sweating, crying, screaming. And the next second I was completely healed. And I just started listening to my intuition, and I found myself on a train with no destination. And a man appeared across from me, and he was wearing a 12-step fellowship necklace. And I heard a voice in my head, and it said, that's your path. Follow him to a meeting. And from there, some more synchronicities took place. I found myself, in a meeting with a woman who was the program director of a long-term treatment facility here in Brooklyn, where I live. And, I knew that I was in a crowd of 70 people, but I happened to be sitting 2 seats away from this woman who teaches women how to be women again after the use of drugs and alcohol, and that's really what I needed in my life. I needed to figure out how to be a person, a human, without using drugs. Like I was the kind of addict that I couldn't even brush my teeth without being high first, and, like I had this plan that I was going to talk to her after the meeting, and I was going to beg her to help me. And when the meeting ended, she had left early. She was gone. And I felt totally defeated. And I got on the bus to go home. And when I stepped onto the bus, she was sitting right there. It was like so perfectly aligned and divine. And I ran up to her totally manic. And I was like, you're an angel. You're sent to earth. You're here for me. I wanted to talk to you inside, but you were already gone. And now here you are. Oh my goodness. I can't believe it. Please help me. Can you help me? You're supposed to help me. Please, please, please. And she just said, yeah, we can help you. Come by tomorrow. And she said a sentence that changed my whole life. She gave me a life with that sentence. And I went to that program the very next day with just the clothes on my back. I didn't have anything to take. I was at the bottom of rock bottom, the absolute gift of desperation in my life. And I spent 17 months there. I know, psychotic, totally insane. I didn't have a phone or a computer for a year and a half. I had to read books. It was totally archaic. I felt like a caveman, but I had this insatiable thirst for knowledge. I just wanted to know everything about spirituality, the law of attraction, metaphysics, anything that I could get my hands on. And that's what I did. I stayed in that space. I felt the grief from, this is grief that I had never felt in my life. At that time, my parents had been dead for 11 years. I got to actually feel it and integrate it. And man, it was like a tidal wave of emotion just washing over me every second of every day for months and months and months. And thank goodness I was somewhere safe, like a long-term rehab, so that I couldn't run out the door. I couldn't go to the liquor store. I couldn't go cop drugs. I just had to sit and feel, and I made it through. That was my biggest fear my whole life using drugs, was that I can't handle feeling feelings. And in this program, I learned that, guess what? I really can. Everybody, anybody, if I can, anybody can, and yeah, some of the spiritual practices that I still have integrated in my life today started to take shape there. I study A Course in Miracles, which is a metaphysical text channeled by Jesus. It's a reprogramming and undoing, and it's a very clear message of a great spiritual teacher. And I also study the Baha'i faith. I belong to 12-step fellowship, and I do service for the International Association for Near-Death Studies, which is something that came into my awareness as soon as I left that facility. And, I have found the members of my soul family, those same voices that were up there telling me that I had to come back. They've come into form with me to support me on my journey here. And my life has completely transformed, for the contrast, just I was so desperate and just so empty. And now my life is so full with people, with community, with spiritual principles, and I feel very aligned in my mission and my purpose. And I never knew that life could look like this, and I think the really powerful part of my story, for me anyway, is that, like I thought one thing my whole life, and deja vu. And man, like it was so embarrassing to have to say I was wrong. Like I was wrong. Now I think a different thing. But I have some acceptance around stuff like that today. Like my conception of who God is when I first had my awakening is not the same conception that I have of God now. And I allow that to grow and evolve with me. I don't pigeonhole myself in something that is not expansive. Like I want to continue to expand as a spirit. I want my knowledge to expand with me. And so, I just remain very open-minded, and I get to cherry pick things that I like out of each thing. I've read every sacred text, and I've just taken little things that I like out of each of them, and I design my own spirituality around it. And my life is immersed in spirituality today, and yeah, if nothing I said made any sense, please know this. 3 years and 8 months ago, I was a homeless meth head prostitute strung out on heroin. And today I'm not. And that's all because of my spiritual experiences and being allowing and surrendering and just like being open. And I get to make these beautiful connections like this one right here. And I get to do so much stuff with my life. And if that's possible for me, it's literally possible for anybody. And thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, no, that's so beautiful. I think I had a few questions come up. Like one was around when they showed you the reason why there were these different emotions from distraught and despair and desperation and all this, and then all the way up to love. And could you share why is there pain and why do we need those?
Okay. So, I have a couple of different spiritual beliefs that I go back and forth between what I perceived from the experience itself. And again, the information I was downloaded within the experience still needs to be integrated into a human. So I saw the whole fabric of creation in my experience, but I didn't get to take all of that back with me because a human can't compute everything that I saw. But basically, with the idea of choosing our lives, with the idea of this pre-birth planning, the way that I sort of perceived it was, like I said, Adam and Eve in the garden, they were nothing but spirit. And they decided, hey, you know what? Maybe I can have my own thought. And I think that the original idea of creation, the way that they explained it to me, was about unconditional love. And so they put me into the perception of my mother giving birth. And they showed me as an infant being born and recognizing my creator. Wow. Because I would imagine that for a mother giving birth, it might not be all unconditional love. I'm sure there's a little underlying fear there. It's probably very scary, this transition into a new phase in life. But as a baby, you're like, whoa, this is it. This is my creator, this is amazing. And that unconditional love between the two. And then when, I had this thought in the space and I said, well, why isn't creation like that? What happened? And I was taken into the awareness of every woman that I've ever known in my life that's lost a child. And I was taken through the moment when their creation died. And the way that I perceived it was that that's what God felt like when we took our own will, when we decided to have this thought, when we ate from this tree of knowledge and we wanted to know ourselves. And we took all of this self-will to create our own instead of going with God's creation. And I've never really been able to find great words to explain it. In my head, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. But I don't know if it computes out the right way. But basically, to experience duality, to come back to the awareness that God is truth, that source is truth. Unconditional love is the underlying truth. For me in my life, I don't think that I would be as adamant about my spiritual beliefs if I didn't have that extreme contrast. And not everybody needs to have that contrast. Maybe they did in another incarnation and they chose not to have it in this one, But for me, that's what I believe. I believe that we have this large range of emotions because it's probably really boring in heaven. Like, could you imagine being in unconditional love all the time? Snooze. Like, let me go down to earth. I hear that it's on fire. Let's see what all of those lack emotions are like. And yeah, that's why I think that.
Oh, so interesting. Yeah, but still foundationally, the one truth is love, and anything that's otherwise, it's the game of trying to come back and remember yourself as love, no matter which character you get set back into. Because that was interesting. How you're like, don't put me back into her. Let me go somewhere else. I think too, when you talked about 3D and 5D, could you talk a little bit about what that means to you?
Yeah. So 3D and 5D are two different levels of thought. So for me, a third dimensional level of thinking is about fear, loss, lack, grief, like lower vibrational thoughts. When we're talking about like the scale of consciousness, and they're human thoughts, right? Like desire, even these are all like 3D levels of thought. Fifth dimensional level of thinking is more God focused. Third dimensional level of thinking is ego focused. So like my ego desires physical things, give me all the pretty little things, right? Relationships, give me my soulmates, let me have all these things. These are like ego manifestations of thought. Now, God-centered thoughts, fifth dimensional thoughts, are about spirit, service, fellowship, community, light, love. That's the way that I see the shift from 3D to 5D, and I see how it's already taken place in my life.
Right. And you said that like you could pick up on what other people, so almost like set psychic abilities in a way, and seeing auras. And so that would be what you'd say 5D is as well.
Well, I don't have those abilities anymore. Like that was something that came to me when I first had the awakening, and I was like, hey guys, this is terrifying. Take it away. And they were like, okay. I just think that it's just a switch in a thought. Like for instance, a 3D thought, I have a resentment against someone, right? Like I feel anger when I think about a particular person. A 5D level of thought around that situation would be offering forgiveness and compassion. Like that's a more spiritually attuned thought. So when I think about Earth being liberated and consciousness shifting, I think that we're coming from a level of third dimensional thinking, fear-based, anger, irrational thought, to God-centered forgiveness, compassion.
So when you saw yourself as a soul picking out attributes of who you were going to be on Earth, so I'm wondering. So I hear, and you might even heard Suzanne Giesman speak at the conference as well. And she talks about how like sometimes the personalities you get, they're exactly like grumpy on Earth, grumpy there. But she says sometimes she gets this signal like my eyes are wide open and now I'm true love. And so it makes me wonder of like how much of our personality is like, for lack of a word, spirit or soul, like whatever you would call that, infinite, and then how much of it is just cause we're in this body. And if I got a head injury, like now my personality might be completely different, or even for different levels of physiological stress versus feeling safety, our personalities are different. And then I was so excited to talk to you too, because I know you love eternal family systems, which really lends itself to very spiritual. And I think over the years, because it's now evidence-backed, but Richard Schwartz started it in the 80s, I've seen it become more spiritual too. And so, so I'm kind of curious about, how much of that do we take with us versus like, oh, that was just because I was exposed to toxic mold and I went insane. Right.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish that I had like a clear answer that could come to me. For me, I think that a lot of the personality profile stuff, and, Michael Newton and Robert Schwartz, they have lots of books about pre-birth planning, and they've done like a lot of hypnotherapy on people to regress them in between lives to see what that's like. I don't think that our souls have any personality. I think that they're blank slates, and that's why they want to come here, because they want to experience stuff. Like I said, I think it's real boring in heaven. I think that we just, we're like, have you ever seen like that imagery where it's like the up and down of like the heartbeat on the monitor.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, yeah, if there's no ups and downs, you're dead. Well, I think that heaven is like, meh, you know, it's just like, but it's not like a bad meh.
Yeah.
It's like unconditional love, which is, you know, killer. Like we can only wish that we could have that here, you know, and some people do achieve that in their lives, like enlightened gurus and stuff are in a constant state of unconditional love. But I think that when we sign up to experience certain things, we understand that these certain events will more than likely create certain personality traits. So like for me, like experiencing sexual trauma as a small child is going to create a victim mentality in my life. And I'm going to carry that into my life. And I'm going to be guarded and I'm going to be a people pleaser. And, you know, like, so these personality profile traits come based on the life events that are markers in my life. For instance, having a spiritual awakening. That is something that is going to shift my personality profile into other things. So the reason why I like IFS and I like shadow work is because I like deconstructing the pieces of my human, because I can see that they're not my spirit. If I can dissect the pieces of my human, then I can get to the awareness that I am actually nothing but spirit. And so I do that by doing character development around the pieces of myself. So, you know, like my addiction, he has a face, he has a name, he has a voice. He's a man, by the way, obviously. My addiction is a man. There's certain pieces of my, you know, like my shadow that are masculine. And then there's certain pieces that have no gender. There's certain pieces that are feminine. You know, like I experienced a lot of stuff with eating disorders. When I let go of drugs, a lot of eating disorders manifested, and man, they had a lot of steam because they were just sitting in the sidelines waiting for the drug addiction to subside. And so, you know, I gave them all names and labels. And, you know, this is something that those systems, you know, like IFS does, you know, it helps me to see that there's something protecting something else, you know, like there's some piece of me that doesn't want to go behind that door to see what's going on back there because I don't think I can handle it. And so instead I come up with all these different coping strategies to help me deal with it. And I love being able to do character development around it because I can see that it's not me. And I can ask each individual part of myself, what do you need? Tell me what you need from me. What kind of love do you need? What kind of attention do you need? Can I give it to you? Let's have a conversation about it.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. That's so cool. Thank you. Yeah. So Ian's podcast. Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah. So I can't even believe it. I can't believe people believe in me, you know, like, yeah, it's so challenging for me to see like the growth in myself and that like I can be trusted to have projects and watch them go from just the spark of a thought all the way into maturity. But the Ions organization has been very big in my spiritual integration process. When I came out of rehab, I was really looking for my spiritual communities. And I had found some of them while I was still in treatment. And then I said like, okay, this is great. I found my Course in Miracles community. I found a Baha'i community. I have my 12-step fellowship, but like, who can I tell all this wacky stuff about my time in eternity to? You know, like I feel like I can say those things in my communities, you know, like I'm always trying to be the most authentic version of myself. I really don't censor myself, but I just felt like there was probably somewhere else that I could go with people that would really understand like the rejection that I felt from God. That's really what I was going through when I came out of treatment. I thought, how do I get back to heaven? You guys told me that I had to stop using drugs. I did. I completed a program. Now send me back home, you know? And it took me a long time to integrate the fact that it's not about going back to heaven. It's about bringing heaven here. And so I watched the Surviving Death docuseries on Netflix. And the first episode is about near-death experiences. I heard Mary Neal share about her near-death experience. And I thought, whoa, that's what happened to me. And I couldn't believe that she was talking about it with such clarity and eloquence. And I was like, in my mind, it just seems like this jumbled mess of wires. Like, how am I ever going to get that way where I can tell it like so beautifully? And so I saw that on Ions, they have sharing groups online. And so every week I would go to their sharing groups and I would just cry for the whole 90 minutes. And like every once in a while, I would come off mute and I would be like, why has God rejected me? Why did God reject you? Like, why are we here? You know, I would get like so emotional and upset. And I heard people like share my story, you know, and they told me how they integrated their experience. And I thought, and then their experiences happened decades ago. And I thought, oh my God, they're still here. They're still here after 20 years. Like they don't get to go back home. And that's when I started to really settle into the idea that I'm not going anywhere. Like heaven really is here. You know, it's just how I make it. Like, how do I make heaven here? You know, how does God help me do that? And so, yeah, so I started doing volunteer work for them in 12-step fellowship. They're very adamant about being of service. It's like the cornerstone to 12-step fellowship. And so I got right involved with service in the NDE community as well. And then they asked me to come on board to do their coordination for their webinars. And so I find speakers and I host our webinars. And now they've given me this opportunity to create a podcast. And I'm so excited about it. Our first episode is going to be released in the next 2 weeks. And basically, I really want to give space for people who have never shared their experiences before. And also people who have, and they have things to promote. I'm really hoping to create a sense of close community and support for people on a spiritual path. They don't have to be NDEers. You know, they don't even have to really have had some sort of profound transformative experience, just like anything that puts us on the course of spirituality. You know, like there's so many different routes to come to this underlying truth. And for me, that truth is tribe, community, love, kindness, compassion. And I'm just interested in giving space for people who would like to share about their journey coming into, you know, that awareness as well. And yeah, I'm really excited about it. Also, IANS has a demographic of like much older people. It's a lot of old white people, which is totally fine, you know, but like in my mind, I see diversity, I see inclusion. I want to open up the world, you know what I mean? Like that's what I feel like in my spirit anyway. And so yeah, I'm looking to accomplish that, to giving a voice to people who haven't had one yet in this particular community, and being very inclusive.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And you're also a recovery coach. So I imagine that you bring this into your work as you're helping people you're coaching. Is that true?
Yeah, I do. But I also listen to spirit very closely when I'm at work because I need to know what not to say as well, because some of this stuff can sound kind of crazy. Like when, you know, and I know that, and that's one of the purposes of the podcast as well. And, you know, even what you're doing here with your podcast, like making the paranormal normal, you know,
right?
what I mean?
Exactly.
Like making the supernatural natural. How we have to start shifting that, you know,
you know, what's funny? I'm reading this book now. I do Noetic. Was it Ions? Not Ions, but Ions too. And so I heard Helene Wabe, I hope I'm saying it right, and the MCR talking about, so she has a book, Science of Channeling. And they did a survey. 96% of the participants checked that they had at least one paranormal experience. So when you said making it normal, that's what I'm like, well, doesn't that make it normal? And so it is, I think the biggest thing that I hear NDE experiencers say is that some people just do not want to hear that there's only love, there is no hell. And that is such a common experience. And what are your thoughts on that? And then also the other things where it was like the God word even could be a trigger for people, right? And yeah, so yeah, if you have any like insights as to like how you have these conversations where people tend to like get put off, and then also on the converse, like what's the nice way to like tiptoe into the conversation but you just get the spiritual guidance, I guess. So that's easier.
Well, okay. And that's a practice. That's not something that I always have. I often take my own will back and I'm like, I know the answer. Let me be solution focused and try to like fix, manage, and control. And that's my ego, you know?
Right. Yeah.
But Yeah, I rarely use the word God. I think I'm only using it now because I just came out of a meeting with somebody and they were using it. And so I'm like, it's like in my head. But I use the word source.
Okay.
And even that can be off-putting for people. So I often say universe when I'm talking to clients or people that I know are not spiritually inclined, or not inclined, that's the wrong word, but like just people that are not, into this stuff. I generally say the word universe because I feel like that's very inclusive. And it's much more digestible. And something that I've learned in my process of integration and coming into a career of service is that I don't need to say anything. You know what I mean? Like, really, my purpose here is to listen and to just take it in and to hear the reflections of myself and to see how that can transform my own journey. Because when people are ready to hear, they know that they can come to me to ask questions or to hear, like I said, I'm very authentic in the fact that I've had spiritually transformative experiences. And at first, when I first had the awakening, I was like, I must go out and tell everyone that God is cool, God exists. And I would refer to God as a he, because that was like the language that I had heard, like not growing up, God wasn't part of the picture in my house, but just like in our collective, you think of God, you think of some old man in the sky with a beard, right? So I went out onto the New York City subway system and I started proselytizing and I was like, God is real, he loves you. Stop eating McDonald's, don't take pharmaceuticals. And I was like pointing and screaming and I was all in people's faces.
What years was that? Because I was actually born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens. I worked in Manhattan for a stretch there. Now I'm in San Diego, California. So I was taking subways all the time.
Oh my goodness. This was in 2019.
Okay. No, so I was
you would remember I was nuts. I mean, like I definitely made an impression on people, but I feel like it was, and it's so funny because I felt called to do that. Like I thought that was the download, like tell everybody. And I didn't realize that I could figure out another way to do that. I thought they just meant like go and yell in people's faces and make them believe. And so that's what I did. And now I realize that a lot of the time, my purpose is just to listen. I mean, like, I don't have to do anything. I am a shining testimony. Like, I know that it radiates off of me. And that's such a beautiful gift. As long as I continue to maintain my spiritual practices, I know that I am like a glowing testimony to transformation and the power of the universe. And so I really don't have to say anything. Like I have a lot of people ask me like, well, what do you do with atheists? Like, what do you say to them? And I'm like, I don't say anything to them because who am I to take away their experience? If somebody tried to push it on me when I was an atheist, I would have been even more resistant. Like you create resistance when you try to shove things on.
Oh, yeah. 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 I say I was an atheist since fourth grade. I think I was like 8 or 9. My baby brother died. And we were raised very Catholic. My dad was actually in the seminary. He had dropped out. My mom was a nun for many years. My grandmother took us to church. And she basically said, God just really wanted this baby. And I was just like, not true. And so anytime I heard the word God, it was like you're talking to that little 8 or 9-year-old who's like just lost her baby brother. And so that was always a trigger word for me. But I also took atheism to mean I don't believe like no God, but I felt like there was something else, like the secret arcana, and didn't really even understand the difference till recently between spirituality and religion.
Wow.
So, right. So if we like forsake a religion, that doesn't mean we sweep away the prospect of being spiritual, because it was ultimately people who had spiritual experiences who felt so compelled to like write them down in one book or that book or this what have you. So so sorry for interrupting, but it's an interesting conversation because in a way, like I would have wished someone would like have been able to say to me like, you would love ions, or you would love this, or you would love that. So I guess it is, you're right. You just listen and and see what's going on for that other person. And yes, because we hold, that's those parts of us that just hold on to these pains and fear of, if I don't do this, I'm gonna go to hell, or fear of, or in my case, like sadness of like, you say that to me, it's like I'm this like little child who just lost her brother, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. For me, I am an atheist. I am a dualistic atheist. I do not believe in a God that is good and bad. I do not believe in dualism when it comes to spirit. So in that way, I am an atheist. I believe in a non-dualistic God that is only unconditional love. Like when I tell my own story, when I entered the space of heaven, I was a homeless meth head prostitute, an orphan to a double suicide. I was an atheist. I was a sex worker. I was a racist. I had done so much harm to people. I was an abuser. I was like a victimizer. I had done so many terrible things. And it was like none of it mattered. Like it was just part of my plan was to experience all of those things. And that doesn't mean that I came back and I was like, well, I can keep living my life like that, because it doesn't matter when I get to heaven. Because for me, I crave to live righteously now, because I know that love like that exists. And I want to go back home and never have to come back here. So I'm going to do whatever I got to do. But like, I know that it doesn't matter. Logically, I know that it doesn't, but I'm here, I'm living a life inside of this dream. And why shouldn't I make it a good dream? Right. My life before was a nightmare, and I want to live in the happy dream. And that's what A Course in Miracles teaches me, is that I can shift my perspective and it no longer has to be a nightmare here. And I understand that it is a nightmare for a lot of people. It was for me for decades and decades. And I totally understand it. And you know what? Part of the undoing with myself was letting go of that. How do I let go of everything that I've ever known? I only know what it means to suffer. And I like suffering. I'm addicted to it. I am addicted to suffering. How do I let go of this thing that has been with me my whole life? It's my only comfort, my only companion. But I will say that it was just a practice. I just had to let go little by little by little. Like my story is a major transformation all at once, but it took me a long time to integrate letting go of patterns and behaviors and beliefs and undoing all of those things. But man, my life is just, it's beyond now that I finally let go of those beliefs that don't actually serve me. They're familiar, but they don't serve me.
Neat. Oh, wow. Thank you so much. And I think you sharing just unabashedly everything, putting it out there, it's just so powerful, so important, so brave. I don't know if you consider it brave, but right. But anyway, it's just, we appreciate it.
I think that it's the only thing that I feel called to do. You know what I mean? Because, well, number one, nothing here is real. So why not? What's the deal? And I hope that it can spark some hope in somebody who is that way. You know what I mean? Like the beliefs that I had before, I never thought that I would let go of them. And the fact that I'm living my life a different way today. And I'm real open about it. I mean, I'm very loud. I'm very loud about spiritual transformation. I'm very loud about recovery. I want everyone to know that it exists in whatever way I can without yelling in their face on the subway. So, I want to be loud. And you know what? Like, I want to honor the story of my spirit. Okay. Like, because I was downloaded with my pre-birth planning, this is my most sacred art. I wrote the story of this human, and I'm proud of my work as a writer and an artist. My spirit is. And so why shouldn't I share about it? Because it's not pretty. You know what I mean? Like my life before is ugly. It's darkness. You know what I mean? But she existed. She kept my spirit in its place. Like she held the container. And even though she was completely unaware that my spirit existed within her, like she played her part in our story. It's kind of like when, like in a sitcom, when like halfway through it, like they get a new actress to play the same part, like Roseanne, like new Becky came in, like that's me, like I'm the new version. But like the same spirit, like the same character is still being played. And that's really what it feels like for me, So like, I want to honor my spirit by sharing the whole of the story. I want to also let myself and other people know that I'm not ashamed of my past, because spirit has told me that I don't have to be. And working the 12 steps of a 12-step program gives me so much freedom. And you don't need to be an addict or an alcoholic to work the 12 steps. There's tons of books about like how to just work it in any area of your life. And for me, it's real spiritual freedom.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. I'll be sure to put links to your podcast. You said in a couple of weeks, it'll be the first one. Awesome sauce. Thank you again. It's so nice to have a conversation with you. And
you too. I'm so grateful for you. Thank you so much.
This is lovely. Sunlight streaming up better. Shine up like the beams of the spread.